Hello, everyone. This is our April 23 session in Columbus Sitecore user group. Excited to have Sebastian Winter talk about XM Cloud Components in Action, which is a new product Sitecore introducing for front-end as a service. So we are very excited about that. Today's session is sponsored by Nistic. So the Cincinnati-based Sitecore implementer. So without much ado, Sebastian, take over.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me again. I think I'm constantly a guest now of this user group. As it's online, it's easy to join, and it's also European friendly time, so that works out well. Right. So this presentation is about, as Himadri stated, about XM Cloud Components. I've done that presentation on SuCon, so if you've been at SuCon, you'll probably see more or less the same. However, we have Q&A at the end, so maybe that's valuable to you. I don't want anyone to drop now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, or set expectations here. So yeah, today I would like to show you the new XM Cloud Components in action. And well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sebastian. I'm a developer advocate at Sitecore, which means I'm caring about giving developers the right information on our content-related products so that you have basically an easier time starting with our new products. And me and my colleague create videos on the Discover Sitecore YouTube channel, or write blog posts or articles on the developer portal, or do these kind of presentations, right? So that's what we do. And for this session, I would like to introduce you to XM Cloud Components, obviously, and of course, show you the product. So this is not only showing slides. We will take a look into the product, how it feels, how it looks. And we will create components. We will use them in XM Cloud Pages, and we also will create external data sources to pull in data from other sources. With all shown today, I also want to give you an idea on what XM Cloud Components is based on and how that all works behind the scenes. And last but not least, we will see that XM Cloud Components, or what XM Cloud Components means at the end for developers. So as this is really, really fresh stuff, a little disclaimer before we start. So Sitecore Components is only available in early access right now, which means it's available to certain customers that have XM Cloud already. And things might change until it's generally available. So yeah, but still, I think it makes sense to have an early sneak preview of the product and see what's coming. If we start very, very basic, and maybe just to set the scene and get a common understanding what a component is. So from my understanding, a component is a visual reusable building block to be used to design the pages of our websites or web shops. So each component can have a different purpose or functionality, sometimes just displaying text or images, sometimes with call to actions or more sophisticated functionality. And in the case of the screenshot that we see here, we have several components in place, like on that page, but let's focus on this text image component here in that dotted frame. I can reuse the UI of that component itself, right? And I can also select an own dedicated data source to it. So I have the same component, just displaying different data. And of course, I can use the same component on a different page and share the same data source so I can manage it centrally, right? So, I mean, that's nothing new, I believe. You've all worked with components in XM, XP, or maybe already in XM Cloud, just that we have all a common understanding of what a component is. So what is then XM Cloud Components, right? That's the interesting question for that presentation. And XM Cloud Components is an in-browser front-end as a service. What you see is what you get component builder. Okay, so taking it slowly. So XM Cloud Components adds an option to XM Cloud that enables marketers to take more responsibility in the component creation process. That does not mean that it replaces developers completely, but we will see what that means for developers later in that presentation. So you can work with design atoms or molecules or other components even to create functional UI components from scratch. And you can connect these components to a wide variety of data sources and power them by data flowing in from one or many providers. So Axon Cloud Components allows you to design style sheets and also theming. We will see also what that means. And well, the great thing is that all components are totally reusable, right? So we have a central place to manage the component, and we can use that like in different locations. Axon Cloud Components is divided into 3 main areas. Actually, there are 4 if we take the main navigation of Axon Cloud Components, but let's focus on these 3 for now, because I would say they contain the majority of the product. So starting on the left side, we have the builder to assemble components. And then we have the style section to define the design system. And then the data sources section where we can import data from other content providers. Yeah, not mentioned here is the 4th section, which is called publishing. So that area shows a kind of workbox with items that need to be reviewed and that can be published. So there is a workflow in components, and that can be handled under the publishing navigation item. So let's go through them one by one before we actually open the browser and see that in action. So starting with the builder. In the component builder, we can organize and build components, so probably as expected from the name. And components can be grouped in collections, so we can organize components and just not have a big bulk of them. We can organize them basically in collections. Each component can be then built off several elements, such as cards or badges, buttons, paragraphs. You can use headlines or links or images or even other components. So that's the elements that we use to assemble new components in the builder. And then components can have different versions, and that maps best to what we know from SXA, maybe from variations, so that or variants. So we can have the same content displayed in a different UI, for example, or we can just handle the responsiveness based on different breakpoints using versions in components. Coming to the next section. So in the style section, we can define the design system through a visual design builder, similar to defining styles in your style sheet, but just visually, right? So we just have fields to set up things, and we will take a look at this as well. So that can be similar to building a house. So before we actually work or live in that house, we need to set it up once, right? So and we start from the very, very beginning. So that's the navigation. What you see here is the navigation in the style section, and the workflow working in the style section is from top to bottom. So we will start at the top, and we usually start with the basics of our house, right? So we start choosing the bricks and so we define the fonts as an analogy, and the color palette with the hex or RGB codes, and the graphics or icon sets that we want to use, or even the breakpoints that are relevant to our experience. There is something pre-set up already in that area, but of course you can override that and fit that to the needs of your clients. In the next step, we need to define the right cement or glue to bricks, to glue the bricks together. So we define the rules such as the typography, meaning sets of fonts that we've defined before, right? For different purposes in different sizes, or if they should be displayed all capital letters, or the sizes can vary per breakpoint. So all that we can set up in the typography. We can have decorations, so how boxes or buttons or cards are displayed. We can set how all of that should look like in terms of what shapes are used, or if we shall have rounded edges or drop shadows or borders. So everything like that is set up in the decorations. And then we can define fills as well with colors or effects like gradients or things like that. And we can define the standard spacing like paddings or margins between different elements. Going further in that styles workflow, once the rules are defined, we set up the walls for our house, meaning we can set up the elements we build with. And that are the elements that I mentioned earlier that you actually use to drag and drop on the page to build your component. So we can define text elements like headings or paragraphs using the typography we've defined before and the colors. And we define inline elements such as buttons or badges or links. And we define then, last but not least, the block elements such as sections or cards using certain spacings or decorations or fills. Last but not least, we can take all of the different walls and build the house. And this is what we call themes. So a theme combines the setup for text, inline, and block elements. And of course, from the same walls, we could build different houses, right? So we can assemble the walls in a different way and have then, well, a different theme, like a dark theme or a bright theme, or however you want to name it. Right, also talking about the publishing area or the workflow. As a marketer, you are guided by a workflow when working with XM Cloud components, and new components will start in a draft state. Well, that's not a surprise. But if you want to use the component in Pages, you need to stage it. So you need to bring it to the next workflow step. And if it's ready to go live, well, you can publish it, right? And now going back, for example, unpublishing it or unstaging it will lead to a different state. And you can see that in these gray boxes here around the colored boxes. So you always know what component state is, what the component state is and where it came from, basically. Okay, so enough of theory and enough of slides for now. This is called components in action, and let's actually have a look into that, right? So let's build our first component. Let me switch. So I'm here in the, I need to turn to the other monitor, sorry for that, but I'm here in the Sitecore Cloud portal from where I can access all of my composable apps. So you can see I have access to XM Cloud or Content Hub One or Personalize or Connect and all of these. And I'm using just the demo environment that I used also for the SUBCon that we had in Malaga. So let me start this one and enter the components app. So what you can see is here, well, that's not the components app, but we have two sites. We will work then in the SUBCon Malaga site. But not right now. Let's just go to components. There we go. Okay, so when you enter components, you will find here, well, the first you will find is that it's marked as being early access. And we have the sections that are just introduced. So we have the component builder here starting with, and then we have the style section with the design system, we have the data sources section, and then publishing, and we will go through them in the demos one by one. So what I want to do now is I want to just create a new component from scratch so that you have an idea on how that works, basically. So what I will do first is I'll add a new collection, and as I said, the collections group my components. As you can see, I tried it out several times, so that's why the components all look the same. But usually you would group your components into different collections to organize them. Similar to what you do in the toolbox, right? So if you have your components, you want to put them in sections so that content authors can find them easier. And those collections you will see later on will replicate into Pages as well. So the same grouping is there as well. So let's add a collection and call that Columbus. Save it, and let's add our first component. I call that hero. Teaser. I just prefix that also, not to mix it up with any of the other trials I did. Well, you can still change the collection here, right? So you can still say, well, I've accidentally started to create it in the Columbus collection, but I want to have it somewhere else. Which I don't. I'm totally fine with that. And now I start editing the component. So I start with a blank canvas here, this white area. And if I click into that, I have that floating toolbar similar to what we know from Experience Editor or Pages. And I can start adding my elements. So the first thing before I do that actually is I want to have, well, let's see the target. And that's also what I showcased in at the SUCCON. So I have a component here on the Sitecore.com website, the hero teaser, or however they name that. And I want to recreate that in components. So that's my target, right? So I see I have that card here, and that, well, if I collapse my developer tools, you see it's kind of in a two-column layout where I have one column with my card and then have a background image. So I will redo that as well. So therefore, I set the grid layout here, and I say I want to work in two columns in the section. So you directly see that. I can also weight that, but I'm totally fine with that. And now I add a card, which is under blocks, and I add it here. So here's my card. Yeah, and let's just copy over the content from here. As you can see, it's considering already the styles from the origin website. And why is that? If we take a look into that, well, can we? Well, no, I'm confused now. But let's just go on. So I have that here, and the next thing I want to do is I want to add an image, which should be my background image, right? So I'm adding that in my second column for now. And well, I haven't hosted an own image, so let's just steal the one from that website. So if I take a look here, well, they're using this background image. Let's copy the URL of it and use it in here. Okay, I'm missing the HTTPS. I should have copied that as well. And here we go with the image. And well, we want to have that as a background, I said, right? So yeah, pretty close to the original already. We are missing the button. So let's add the button. Let's add it here at the end of the card. I'll just call that, not sure what. Well, I can also link that. Let's keep it like that for now. Okay, so it's looking pretty close, but what I've done is I've prepared already a theme with more, like I put some effort in designing that. So I'm just, instead of the default theme that we start with here, I'm just applying the one called dark theme. And now it's even closer to the original, right? So, and well, with talking through, it's like a couple of minutes and you have that created. And you could go on and say, I want to actually copy that. So duplicate the element to create a new version, and then make that maybe a mobile version of it, right? Having the image on top, or having even a different image on top, because the wide image doesn't work in a mobile screen. So you see here that we can say for which breakpoints that component should be displayed in that way. Right, so our first experience creating a component. Let's go back to the slides for a few minutes. So now that we created the component, let's actually use it on our website. So the Pages editor has a native integration with XM Cloud components, and you find them beside your regular components. You can drag and drop them the same way as you are used to do that. And well, you need to know that you only see staged or published components appearing in the Pages editor, and and components need to be published in order to appear on the live website, which kind of makes sense. So the content is currently only editable. Well, just to be clear here, the content is currently only editable in XM Cloud components and not in Pages directly. So that's on the roadmap as far as I know, but currently you can only manage it from components, not from pages. Right, let's also have a look into pages. So I have started the pages editor here already, and as I just mentioned, I need to stage the component first so it appears in my pages editor. So therefore I have this little button here to say I want to stage it, and well, basically now it's staged. The next thing would be to just publish the component, right? But for to work with it, I just need to stage it, and let's reload the pages editor and see if the new component actually appears. Okay, yes, so we have, well, maybe starting with that. So you probably have seen the pages editor already, and you can do your, what you see is what you get editing in different breakpoints as well. And you have your usual components. Well, in this case, these are the headless SXA out of the box components. I haven't added any of those. And then beside that, we will have a tab for our frontend as a service components, which are the ones coming from the component builder. So in here, you can see all the different collections, which I can collapse. And well, as I said, it helps actually to organize them, right? So I have also my Columbus collection here, and I can use that component and drag and drop it onto my page. It's giving me the information that it's not yet published, so I need to take care about publishing it, so it also appears on the website later on when I publish my website or that particular page. And as you see, I just drag and drop it as any other component. It appears here, but as I also mentioned, nothing is inline editable here right now. So that can only be done, as of now, it can only be done in components. Okay, so yeah, not much more to show about that. Drag and drop it onto your screen wherever it fits best, and there you go. So going back to the slides. Right, so of course, components can not only handle static content. So they can also import content from other content providers, such as Content Hub One, if we stay within our product portfolio, or other CMSs, or you can use ChatGPT to generate your content, or well, of course, you can use XM Cloud to use to provide content, or any PIM, or you name it, basically. Therefore, you can configure data sources, and that's what you do in the data sources section here. So data sources allow fetching data from any GraphQL or REST endpoint, and you can also use static JSON, for example, to mock responses before having actual access, right? So that's something usual, that you're waiting for access, or like waiting for someone to implement an API, but you have defined it already, so you know how the JSON response looks already, so you can mock it, use it, and build your components upon it. So this provides a lot of flexibility for where you can get content from, right? Anything that has a REST endpoint or a GraphQL endpoint can be used. Yeah, so okay, are you good? Maybe you can mute yourself. Yeah, let's.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah, so let's try that out. So going into components again. Here we are, and entering the data source section. So I have a couple of data sources set up already just to try it out. You can see I've done the demo several times to make sure it works today. And but what you can see as well, I've also used ChatGPT to create a data source, or you can see a couple of the out-of-the-box components already providing their data sources from XM Cloud here that you can directly use with components. What we will do today is we will create a new data source coming from Content Hub One, from the GraphQL endpoint, and we will query the GraphQL endpoint and then create a component using that. So let's add a new data source and call that Columbus recipes. You can give a description, and what I need to do here, well, I know Content Hub One has a GraphQL endpoint, so I need to fetch the GraphQL endpoint and build out my query. And therefore, I'm using the Content Hub 1 GraphQL IDE. And what you see here is I have prepared a query already. So what it does is it queries the all recipes. So it queries basically all recipes that I've created, and it's giving me a set of results, so a list of results, and giving me an ID, a recipe title, a preparation description, and then also the image along with the file URL that I need to display the image at the end. Well, I've executed the query already. Just doing it again was giving the same results. I could also add more fields to it. So let's see what else I have here. For example, ingredients. Query it again, and then I would see the ingredients here as well, right? So nothing fancy. What I need to do to access this is I need to generate an API key, which I can do in Content Hub 1. So I will delete this API key later on. So yeah, but I need to show how that works. So what I will do is I will just copy that query here into components, into the query field. That will not work because I first, of course, need to connect my endpoint, which I will do as well. So I'm taking the endpoint URL and putting it here. And I also need to provide the actual API key in the headers. So using the XGQL token, adding it here as a parameter and having that one, copying it here. Yeah, let's see if that works. Let's fetch the data. And what you can see is it has discovered the whole structure of my data. So it's querying the all recipe endpoint. It has the ID, a recipe title. So all the fields I can use later on during the component creation process to map my component texts or headlines or whatever with the fields I get from Content Hub 1. And when I press the fetch button, I have basically in the JSON field, I have the fetched response. So this is what you would also use if you have mock data, right? So if you have a mock response because you don't have access to the API yet, or if you don't want to query it every time, you can just put that here. And that's what basically that process did for me. So let's save that and use that for my component creation. So back in the SUC-Columbus collection, I add a new component and call that SUC-Columbus recipes. Save it, create it. Okay. So this time I want to have a teaser of 3 recipes, giving me an image, a little headline, and then some text. So that's the idea, similar to a promo component that we know from SXA. So as I want 3, I'm setting my layout to use 3 columns. That's already fine. And the only thing I need to do is I need to set up the first one, right? And then yeah, you will see what happens. So I'm adding a card first, and then I want to have an image on top inside my card. And then I want to have a text element below my image. Well, can I? That's not the position I was aiming at. That's rather the one. And I want to have a headline. So let's say an heading 2 and place it here. Looks good. So now let's manage the data. So that's currently just the design of my component, but I want to make sure I fetch the data from, okay, just here. Okay. Back on the recording. Right. So I said I want to have just 3 of them. So I limit that to 3. And yeah, let's take care about the data. Starting here with the headline. So I want to say, on the headline that this text should be mapped to my data source SUC-Columbus recipes and to the recipe title. So you can see now the 3 different titles of my recipes. And for my text, I want to map the preparation description. So here we go. It's just some lorem ipsum text, but it's 3 times the same, but believe me, it's coming from 3 different data sources. And then let's take care about the image. And here we have to check for the result sets of the image. So the specialty of Content Hub 1 is that you have always an array of images that you get as a response. So that's why we need to select here the results. And if we go back to the image source, we can use the file URL. So you see now we have the images coming from Content Hub 1. And I've just designed the first one, and it repeats just all over to the others. So that's basically how that works. And well, you can use that with any array or with any list of objects from your JSON response. Great. Yeah, let's keep it like that and go back to the slide deck. Okay, so even though XM Cloud Components is a software as a service application, you usually want to look behind the scenes or behind the curtain to be able to understand the product better and make better decisions when planning your client applications. And I totally understand that, so that's why we do that. So, well, XM Cloud Components is technically a standalone product, which marketers and developers can use to create visual UIs using what you see is what you get editors. However, it comes with XM Cloud, but technically, as I said, it's a standalone product. So behind the scenes, XM Cloud Components creates React-based web components and CSS files that are delivered through, well, an own CDN to the client, as you can see here in the graphics. So in the graphics, you see that we have XM Cloud. XM Cloud has its own delivery via Edge. So your rendering host, that may be Vercel, that may be something else, is consuming the graphical Edge endpoint and then displaying the application to the client, right? However, if you are having if you're using components from the component builder, then the content of the components is coming from the CDN that's used to deliver those web components in a scaled and geographically distributed manner. Maybe note here, if you use Vercel as a rendering host, your application is mostly server-side rendered or static content. But in this case, well, even though you have static content, the web component from Sitecore Components or XM Cloud Components is always rendered client-side. So it's always called client-side. Of course, you can use other rendering host providers, just to mention that, and you don't have to use Next.js along with XM Cloud. Every framework and provider has its own pros and cons, for sure. Also XM Cloud Components works with other frameworks, not just Next.js or not just React-based. So while XM Cloud delivers the content and the layouting information to your app rendering host, your rendering host ships the content, including the embedded web component information to your client. So therefore it uses, not sure if you can read that, but it uses the frontend as a service component tag and then providing a library ID to actually identify the component. Right. Another thing is that in the component builder, you can also see and export the React code that's being created while building the component. Especially if you want to use the component somewhere else, so not in XM Cloud or not in Pages. So, well, you can basically export that or use that everywhere. You can also directly export that to CodePen. There's a dedicated button for that. And well, as the component is referenced from XM Cloud Components, you can still control the look and feel centrally from a single location. And I think that's a great benefit, having a central maintenance of components and using that across your applications that you're offering. Now, XM Cloud Components gives definitely more responsibilities into the hands of marketers during the component creation process, and that's true. However, interactions and custom logic will still be built by developers. And with the planned developer experience improvements that you will see on the roadmap in a few slides, XM Cloud Components opens up for developers even more with proper tooling. And also the style section is probably handled by front-end developers or maybe designers, but definitely not by marketers. So I don't see them working in there. And also hooking up all the data sources, that's fairly technical. So I'm not sure if that's something a marketer wants to do. Right, so coming slowly to an end, summarizing what we've seen in the past, well, 35 minutes. So XM Cloud Components is a great new front-end as a service solution, and it allows marketers to create reusable components in what you see is what you get way based on the data sources and design system that have been prepared up front. It simplifies the component creation process in a no-code approach. So we haven't written any line of code, right? But it will provide the abilities to use your custom code as well. If you want to know more, well, we have a Q&A section afterwards, but there is already a great set of documentation available. So yeah, just check that out if you want to know more about it. And yeah, having a little sneak preview on the roadmap. I mean, XM Cloud Component is already a great product, I would say. But for sure, with the feedback we got during internal access and also the early access customers, we prioritize what needs to be handled next. So to improve the developer experience of the product, we will allow to bring your own components beyond what you already saw. So you can build or code your own components and use that in Sitecore Components. And the idea is that there will be a local development workflow so that you have, well, local implementation capabilities for your components, but then preview those already in the builder before you even publish those, right? So you build them locally, you see them in the builder, and right. And yeah, and there will be a React SDK with available as well. And then feature-wise, well, the data source can be kept in sync. That's the plan. So what we've seen during my demo is that there was a one-time fetch of the data, so it's not keeping the synchronization with Content Hub 1. If I change anything there, I have to refetch the data basically. So that should change, that we have an in-sync connection with the data providers. And as also mentioned, the components are currently only rendered client-side. So what the product will provide is that you can also having them completely rendered server-side to improve the performance. And also you will be able to use your custom CSS in the whole styles creation process. And probably much more to come, but just to highlight these. Yeah. Great, so not sure if I missed something, but we can find it out now, I would say, in a Q&A session. So do you have any questions?
So I think we'll open up for the audience for questions. I have couple. So maybe if I can ask. So Sebastian, this comes with XM Cloud, you said, right? That means that is there a separate pricing or anything? Or it just be bundled with XM Cloud?
No, so it's part of XM Cloud. It's just like Pages or any other tool that you have in XM Cloud. It's paired with that product. There's no dedicated licensing to it. If you have XM Cloud, you will have components as well.
Okay.
Now, in my SoCon presentation, also to emphasize that the title of my SoCon presentation was Sitecore Components, and I changed that now to XM Cloud Components, as this is not a dedicated product that you can purchase separately. Yeah, so it's part of XM Cloud.
Okay, great. So the next question naturally is like, when we are going to get access to it, like, and how we'll get access if like, partners or developers, how are they going to get access to this and play with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, it comes with XM Cloud. So if you have already XM Cloud access, I'm not 100% sure, but I think you should have access already to components as well. And then the question is basically the same on how you get access to XM Cloud, right? And there I still don't have a good answer. The only thing I know is that if you have an opportunity, you can definitely contact your partner manager, for example, and then they usually provide or open up a way where you can have an XM Cloud license to prepare for that customer.
Yeah, so I checked our XM Cloud portal, and I don't see that tab showing up there. So maybe there is something like, we probably have to reach out to reach Carol or someone like, our partner
Yeah, I think
support.
that makes sense. I
Okay.
wasn't sure because I saw it, but I don't know how it can be configured for different organizations in the Sitecore Cloud portal or in components too. I'm not sure if it's feature flagged by organization or that it can be turned on or off. So yeah,
Mhm.
that more or less proves that this has happened. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have more questions, but I will like, keep others in this session to ask question. Does anyone have any questions for Sebastian? Okay. If not, like, think about it if you have any questions. So this is a component, right? You placed it in the pages and like, you showed us from the Sitecore content author's perspective, there is an expectation that they can change the content, right? Will it write back to the data source, or is that in plan?
So I think I'm not 100% sure, I have to admit, but from what I hear and expect is that we need to differentiate between data sources that are third party or that are first party, right? So if starting with first party, if we have an XM Cloud data source, I'm expecting that we can also change that directly because we're so the moment we drag and drop that component on the canvas, like in pages on the page, we get asked for picking a data source as we used to know that from any other component. And so in that process, we should be able, and I think that's on the roadmap as well, even though I haven't had it on the slide, to inline edit these things in pages. However, if we have third-party systems, and I count Content Hub 1 as a third party here as well, but it could be any other data provider, I don't think that we can play back that data into the origin system. So I'm not sure if that will be inline editable or how this will be handled in the future.
Makes sense. So so the process really is like, you first actually go through your styling, like, select typography and other things, and you create themes. The one that you showed is like, basically you clicked on the theme and theme had already everything was defined, and then that got applied to the component.
Right. I think at the SUCCON we had a similar question, and that's where I offered to go back into the style section because I only handled that in my slide deck, but I didn't actually show that. I think we have some time left, so if you want to, we can just go through that.
Yeah, sure. More is better.
Right. Yeah, let's just do that. So I'm back here in the components builder, as you can see, and I have the second button here in my navigation is the style section. I introduced that on the slides, if you remember, with the analogy of building a house. As I said, you have this navigation here on the left side, which is basically a workflow to go through it. So you set up something in the basics that you use later on in the rules, and then the rules you use later on in the elements, and then the elements you use in the themes. So when you set this up, it's more or less always the same, right? So let's start with the fonts. Well, I have set up some fonts already, but I can add, of course, a new font. Current limitation, and that's probably also one of the reasons why we are in early access and not in general availability. We can only use Google fonts at the moment. And then you have a list of these Google fonts. So I can say, well, let's take the Actor font. And currently this font only allows to have one type of it or one style of the font. So I can select that and save that. Some of the fonts offer more, like this one here. So now I've just defined the fonts that I want to use within my website, right? So that can be different ones, that can be only one. And then you would go next to the colors. So what you can see here, I've defined already some color palettes, like accents, colors, and then I've defined that. And if I would add a color, yeah, it's basically just providing any kind of hex code, right? So if I say something like that, it turns out to be gray. Just a guess. And then you can also set the opacity here if you want to make that transparent, for example. You can provide RGB instead of hex, and well, provide it with a name. So let's say that's Columbus gray, and then what you see here is that it already refers to a certain CSS variable that will be later on used if we apply that. So not really magic. In the back of it, it's creating a style sheet, right? And it's offering those CSS classes to be used later on. Not more magic than this. And then going further, right? Breakpoints have been exposed here already, but if you don't like those, you can adjust them or add your own. And then coming to the typographies, as you can see, I've defined already some typographies, selecting from the font type that I've chosen so far. So I added this, I think the actor one, and I can say, well, I want to have that in a certain size or use a certain letter spacing. Basically, what you would also do in a style sheet, just exposed into a form, into a visual editing experience, having it more friendly for designers or, well, maybe for marketers, I don't know. Same for decorations. I can define, like, my card should have rounded edges, certain shadows. So you have the corner radius, you have drop shadows, you have borders. All that, as I said, goes into the style sheet at the end. Well, fills. So you see, you can also do gradients or just plain colors. You can set up the spacing, like if you want to have your cards having a certain padding inside or a certain margin to the left or to the top, stuff like that. And that all comes into the text elements that we drag and drop on the screen. So we have our different headlines, heading 1 to heading 6 or 5, and paragraph text, and we can define different paragraph text, different inline elements, how buttons look like, primary button, a secondary button. So if I just open this editor, you will see, well, we use the typography that was defined before. We use the spacing that have been defined before. We use the decorations, the fills, and then the colors that have been defined before. And then that turns out, like, at the end, we get a button that has rounded shape and white text color and purple background color and all of that, right? Right, and then last but not least, coming to the themes, that's where all our elements will be clustered together. So if I take a look at the default theme, I see that my block elements, sections, and cards have been defined in a certain way. So I'm saying my default theme is using this design of the sections and this design, like the white card design of my cards. And for inline elements, it's using the read more button design, for example. I can add more, but that's just what I have prepared here. Or for the text elements, it picks the headings that have been defined before in the text element section, right? And so I reuse basically everything I've set up here in a different theme. So if I just take a look into the dark theme, there might be something different, I'm pretty sure, to what the original one was, the default one was, so that we had this opacity card layer with a transparent background or the blurred transparent background.
Correct.
So that's the process basically. Similar, like what you would do in a text editor for your style sheet, you do that here in a visual form-based editor.
Okay. So then, like, the developer will go and basically, if there is some sort of call to action or some kind of like, code has to be added to the component, they will like, write React code or something um, to do that.
Exactly. I mean, a
So
visual
it's
building experience has also limitations, I would say, right? So especially when it comes to custom code, you need to provide that. That cannot be clicked together, right? So you can't have elements that provide that for you. So that's why there will be this SDK, and there will be the experience that you can bring your own code and put it into components.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine like, how that development experience will be like, so it sounds like designer and developer will work together, and I cannot imagine that marketer will come and do the design and the development. So they are basically, they will be utilizing the like, existing theme or the component that are available, and basically, yeah. So
That's what I also see primarily as a pure marketer or content editor.
mhm.
To utilize whatever has been prepared upfront in terms of design system like styles, or in terms of all the elements that can be used. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This is great. Thank you. That's all I had question wise. Like, is anyone have any questions for Sebastian? We have a couple of minutes. All right. Looks like there is no other questions. So thank you very much, Sebastian, as always. This was a great presentation, and really we had the opportunity to actually see something which is not generally still available, and hopefully we'll get access to it and play with it. Looks exciting to me.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
is.
so much.
Maybe one hint, if you have questions about it. We had that question, I think, in one of the MVP lunches, or so. So it's part of XM Cloud. So just use the XM Cloud Slack channel to raise your questions. I think not everyone from product is already in there, but I'm in there, so I answer as good as I can. And yeah, just if you have questions, raise it in there, or maybe you know where to find me, so just contact me directly.
Yeah,
That should be all.
definitely. Slack is a great place to actually ask any questions. I always get so much help from there. Yeah, thank you. All right, that's like, that ends our session, I guess. As always, thank you again for the presentation. Okay, see you sometime, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.